Morning. I decided to make a video today while an atomic bomb's going off, so hope you enjoy it. I think it's going to last the whole video, which doesn't really make sense because it should be just one flash. But um, I'm making a video in my car today just because I really wanted to respond to my brother sleeping in our apartment, so I don't want to wake him up. I had to make a video response to someone who made a response to my most recent video, "The Foundation of Atheism Destroys It." And it was a woman that responded, and all I remember about your screen name is that it said Bionic, so I'm just going to call you the BionicWoman. Hope that's right. I I had to respond to what you said, and you made a 26-minute video, and I thank you for responding to what I said and what you thought about it. I appreciate it. I'm glad we can dialogue about it. But all I really need to respond to is what you said at the beginning in response to the point I made about how if you're trying to pick a worldview, you have to at the foundation have a reason for why life has intrinsic value, and you disagreed with that. And that's fine. But I guess in my video I didn't go into an in-depth explanation of why that's true, because I think it's pretty self-explanatory why life has to have intrinsic value for your worldview to mean anything. And I may have touched on this a little bit when I talked about science in my last video, but I might not have because I had a lot of thoughts going. But when we just have a debate like this, when we have a dialogue back and forth, there's an enormous assumption that atheists make when they have debate. If life itself doesn't have any more value than we give it, then our opinions or our ideas about reason and logic and having discussions doesn't have any more value than whatever value we give that. And that's what I'm talking about. When you're trying to argue for a worldview, saying atheism is true, atheism, like you said, the test of a worldview should be if the facts are behind it. But that even assumes that following what's true or following what's factual matters. When life itself doesn't have essential worth, our opinions about reason and logic and all these other concepts don't have any more value than we give them either. Atheists think that so many atheists think that if they argue for something, it matters. If you use what you think is reason or logic, you assume that people are supposed to care. But in a worldview where life itself doesn't mean anything unless we give it value, that doesn't hold water. It's not a legitimate argument at all. The reason, and it's not this idea that wishes aren't answers. It's not a wish. If life doesn't mean anything, then our discussions don't mean anything at all. It's not going to change anything about life. And if you think it'll make life better if we don't believe in God, that's fine. I don't need to accept your opinion of that. And the fact of the matter is, even today, if life itself, the only value that life has is if we give it value with our opinions, then the idea that God exists only has value because we give it, because it's an opinion in an atheistic framework. And because the majority opinion today is that God exists in some way, then God must exist. And an atheist would disagree with that. And the reason they would disagree with that is because it's not based on what they believe to be reasonable and what they believe to be logical. They don't think that it works. But that assumes that I'm supposed to care what you think is reasonable and logical. And it doesn't matter in an atheistic framework. That's what I mean when I'm saying that you absolutely have to have a reason why life has intrinsic value, because from that is where you get the idea that being reasonable or logical means anything. If life doesn't mean anything, then why in the world should I care about what you think about life? Or how you think I shouldn't believe in God? It doesn't matter if life itself doesn't matter beyond our opinion about it. And if it's all based on our opinion, then, like I said, God must exist right now, and as long as if enough of us believed that evolution wasn't true, then evolution would cease to be true. If it's all based on our opinion, but again, you're arguing for what's reasonable and the facts, as though facts are supposed to matter in an atheistic framework, where life itself doesn't mean anything. That's what I'm saying. Christianity is a worldview that gives you intrinsic worth, and from that starting point is where everything else has value. If life, the value of life is only an opinion, then everything else is also only an opinion. That's it. That's where atheism destroys itself, is at the foundation of assuming that, of wrongly assuming, with the starting point of us, being here by no design, that anything that we say has any real worth, and that I'm supposed to take people seriously or care what they think, when my life only has whatever value I give it, apparently. The starting point is where atheism fails, and that's the point that I was making. I appreciate your response, but again, it was a 26-minute video, and my video was I think a 19-minute video, and I've made bigger videos, and people have made very long videos on YouTube, but it's all with an assumption that, hey, I'm saying something that's reasonable and something that makes sense, and because of that, you have to take me seriously, and you have to believe in what's reasonable and logical. No, I don't. I don't need to do that. If my life doesn't have any essential worth, if our lives collectively don't have any essential worth, it doesn't matter what anyone says. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. Because there's nothing else. The whole assumption behind that idea, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die, is that this is it. Our life is all that there is. And I wanted to make this into one video, but this one's kind of short. Going off on morality, it's an interesting thing that I learned about Richard Dawkins, is that he supported these ads on these buses in England that said, God doesn't exist, so do whatever you want. And when I get into discussions with atheists, they about morality specifically, they try to argue that, well, what's moral is really what's best for society, and that's the framework that we ought to be using. And it's interesting that probably the most famous atheist in the world, his concept of morality apparently is, God doesn't exist, so do whatever you want. But if the idea is do whatever you want, it's not based on a framework of do what's best for other people. And it's true. I mean, in atheism, if God doesn't exist, then morality is only what we make it, and it doesn't have to be based in what's best for life. That's an enormous assumption as well. So there are a lot of big assumptions in atheism, and the fact of the matter is that they are using a Christian framework, even though they try to argue against it. They're using a Christian framework in the sense that they assume that what they say is supposed to mean something to the rest of us. They assume that what they argue for has value, intrinsic value, that isn't based on opinion. That's the foundation for everything that they say. But from the starting point, where life doesn't even have value, your opinions or your ideas about how others ought to live their lives is just as meaningful. So I wanted to respond to what you said, and I appreciate it again, but I think in the first 2 minutes it proved why everything else that you said doesn't really have any worth either. So thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Thanks.